It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, I couldn't be more excited to talk with my guest today. Joining me is Matt Hill, founder and CEO of the Hill Group, and he's a leader in training companies how to sell at trade shows and at conferences. You know, trade shows have changed. People now come with a purpose instead of just going to wander around the show and sort of do a voyage of discovery. It's now more about going to trade shows to achieve specific goals, talk to specific vendors, and it really is a chaotic, unforgiving sales environment that in many ways is much more important and meaningful than it was in the past. And many companies just don't know how to effectively work a show from a sales perspective. And so Matt is going to help us sort it all out. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy. Happy to be here.
So before we get into that, take a minute, introduce yourself, tell us how'd you get started at sales, and really what was your impetus for starting your company?
Well, I got my formal sales training at Xerox Corporation, selling engineering equipment here in the Silicon Valley area, and I got involved in training at Xerox. And then after Xerox, I worked with a regional sales training company and started to do my own thing, basic sales training, regular sales 101, major account selling, negotiation. And then this is literally how it happened. Some guy I was talking to on the phone asked me what I did, and he moved exhibits around. He was a transportation rep, and he asked me, hey, can you train people to work at a trade show? And I said, sure, I can figure that out. Now, that was 26 years ago. So I've been doing this a long time. And
Have you figured it out?
What a good question. I have for the most part, but I was just at a show in Phoenix about 4 days ago, and I learned something new. And I was at another, working with another client in Vancouver, Canada, a week and a half ago, learned something. I'm always learning. It's always changing. It's a great field because you're working with people. It's always different. So
well, yeah, sales in general, right? I mean,
that's
as many years and decades as you have been in it and I've been in it, and you're always going to learn something new every day. I think that's certainly part of the reason I do this show is satisfy my own quest for learning something new about sales from all the great guests we're having on. So trade shows, what's the biggest sales challenge that you see at trade shows for your clients and the companies you work with?
Let's see, the biggest sales challenge. So I look at, first let me make a definition of that, because trade shows are sales and marketing. So the sales piece is, usually gathering qualified leads and then either contributing to the sales process, moving along, or starting it. So the biggest sales challenge is having as many good conversations with high quality visitors as possible. And inside of that, there's a number of skills that are a number of things you have to do that are sort of unique to trade shows, like greeting people quickly and making sure you're working with people who can do business with you and all that stuff. It's really easy to trade show to talk to people who are nice or friendly or know a lot about your business, but they're never going to do business with you. So a big challenge is to make sure you meet your objectives, being professional and polite, but making sure you're talking to the right people and getting politely disengaging from those who can't do business with you. So that's the biggest challenge, I think, is to maximize your time, because at a trade show it's a dynamic environment, and when your trade show booth is really busy and you have more visitors than your own staff in the booth, then some other techniques need to kick in, like working with more than one visitor at a time, because the one you ignore, and research says they'll only wait 15 seconds before they give up and leave. But the one you might be ignoring might be the biggest prospect of the whole show. And if they give up and leave and don't come back, you missed it. So that's the biggest challenge, to make sure you talk to everybody who comes into your booth.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning with trade show, because certainly for small and mid-sized businesses, it's a tough decision these days. Make that decision to say, okay, how do I financially justify going to a show? So I'm sure you work with companies sort of in that initial planning process. How should they set their goals?
Well, let's take one step back, and I will talk about goals. How do they even decide what show to go to? So briefly, they should be talking to their vendors, and if they're friendly with any of their competitors, which happens, they can find out what shows they go to. Before they exhibit, they should walk the show as an attendee and make sure it's the kind of show with the kind of visitors that they want to address. So how do they set their goals?
Let's stop there for a second. So you're saying is plan a year in advance. So if you think you want to go to show for your particular industry, spend a year and go as an attendee first before you make that decision to attend as an exhibitor.
unless it's absolutely obvious. If you're a solar company, maybe you should go to Solar International. Sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it isn't. So if it's not, rather than throw, $10,000 at the show before you are even sure it's the right show, go walk the show. Absolutely. And talk to people. Talk to the exhibitors, talk to the attendees, make sure it's the profile you want to be involved with. Absolutely.
Profile in terms of the customers, the types of customers that are going to come.
That's right. And, exhibitors, you don't want to be the only exhibitor with a product that's not applicable to that industry or that part of that industry, and you might make a mistake. So that's what I recommend. But
okay, so once
really
once you've sort of decided, okay, this is the show I want to go to, then setting their goals and their plan for the show.
That's right. And goals, the ones you can count, so the sales goals are qualified leads, and if you want to give away the Ferrari, you'll get everybody to come by and you can scan their badges or whatever, and you will. But what you want are qualified leads. Now, inside the gross amount of leads, if you give away a Ferrari or have some great giveaway, you'll find qualified leads. But a goal, it's a hard thing. If you've got 5,000 attendees, can you get 500 qualified leads? That's tough. So I'm not even sure 10% of the attendees is a good goal, but you need to set the goals. If you don't know, if it's your first time at the show, set something modest that you can achieve. Maybe say it's a 3-day show, there are 5,000 attendees. Say you want to get, 200 good leads or something. And inside of those leads, if the timing is just right, then you call them hot leads. The hot leads are, leads that want something right away within 30 days or 60 days, depending upon your sales cycle, something very, very soon. So that's good goal setting. Other companies I know, clients I've worked with in the past, they also have goals for number of appointments with the media, because there's a big media presence at most shows. So PR interviews, media interviews. And then they have sales meetings, whether they have conference rooms in their own booth or conference rooms off the show floor or in hotel rooms. They might have a goal for the number of actual sales meetings. If you're selling off the show floor, which a number of companies still do, some shows are still order writing shows, then you need to have a revenue goal. Again, be modest, set the benchmark. And then if you decide to go to the show again next year, you can have a real number to work with rather than just a guess. So that's my goal setting advice.
Okay, so I'm going to break it down just a little bit. So the first goal was, you understand from past years how many attendees they expect to receive. And
Yes.
so you're going to set a goal for the number of leads that you want to receive based on some percentage of the number of attendees.
Yeah, and I often ask my clients, is everybody who walks through the door a potential client? And I was just at a show that the answer was yes, but the answer is often not yes, because the show is not that specific and the attendees are not that specific. So you've got to take that into account. But something modest, 5%, and I would work the goals out with the sales team. If you're in marketing, if you're in sales, work it out with a marketing team. You need to collaborate because this is a marketing event, usually produced by marketing. So they need to be on board with whatever goal you set.
And that's raised up an interesting question.
That's right.
Is really who owns the show? So it's really marketing, you're saying, that really owns it.
Marketing typically owns the show. It's often staffed by salespeople, but usually a mix of salespeople, product managers, maybe some engineering types if it's a technical show, certainly people from marketing. So the person producing this show is usually an event manager, trade show manager. None of the staffs work for them, so they just need their cooperation. It should be as if they're working for the marketing person, or even salespeople. It should be as if they're working for that trade show manager for the next 3 days. So they set the stage for the sales. They have all the products, the right people. The booth should be good, the graphic sign, and it should set the stage for the salespeople. And they can go and, get all the leads they can. But that's usually the case. That's usually how it's structured.
Right. And so to achieve a specific goal in terms of getting enough people through the booth, generating the traffic you need within the show to come through your booth, do companies rely on having this type of, the giveaway, the Ferrari or whatever? I mean, is that sort of a standard?
Well, my general advice is if you're new to the show, give something away just to get noticed.
So if people don't know who you are, you're new to the industry, or as you said, new to the show.
Right. I would say do that. Do something. Do a nice giveaway. The most useful giveaways are still pens and mugs, but you might want to step it up and give away something better, or have a raffle, like raffle off an iPad or some new an iWatch or something interesting. Driving people to the booth, that is also a function of where you are on the show floor. So first time at a show, you're not in a good position because your space selection is based on seniority and how much money you spend advertising. So Depending on the size of the show, if it's a small show, it's not that important. A big show, you're way in the back. You need to get people to the back. So you need to do something to get them there. Absolutely.
And the giveaway is more effective than having people serving sort of as barkers standing at the door to the convention hall saying, hey, come to our booth way in the back.
Yeah, that's also you actually I think you have to pay to do that. I'd rather have you spend the money on the booth. You might do some pre-show mailers to the rent the attendee list and send out a mailer advertising your raffle and your products, of course, and then wait. You're basically trying to attract people. That's the big marketing part. So marketing is responsible for getting people to the booth, and the salesperson's job starts once they get to the booth.
And let's talk about that for a second. So then you talked about various techniques that you use to help engage people when they visit the booth, because you have, as you said, 15 seconds to engage them. So talk about that first moment of somebody walking in the booth. What's their expectation as a visitor, and really what should be the most appropriate and effective response for the salesperson or the marketing person, whoever the rep is in the booth?
Well, that's a good question. So I like to give the overall strategy for the staff, and like I said, mix of salespeople and product people is treat the booth like your own home. If someone knocked on your door, you wouldn't wait 2 minutes to open it. So I don't like the staff to stand around in close circles talking to each other or in any other way give somebody any reason not to come up and talk to them. That means staying off your phones, not playing on the computers or whatever. So you're all aware when someone walks in the booth, and you approach them quickly, openly, and greet them. And you don't get right down to business. You can welcome them. You can ask about the conference session if there is one at the show. You can also just ask what brought you to the booth today. So good open-ended question. You really need to feel like you're happy they're there. I mean, trade shows are a great place to sell and market. You've got the great combination of staff and products and all that stuff. So feel like it's a great selling and marketing environment. Treat it like that. Greet people quickly. Be ready with some opening questions. What brought them to the booth? What kind of business they're in? Those are all reasonable. And in fact, when you greet them, I encourage people as they get closer to the person, just as they're walking up to them, even if it's only a couple of steps, pretend like they do not have a badge on. In North America, you need an attendee badge, usually on a lanyard, and don't just stare at the badge. It's not personable. It's a little bit rude, actually. So as you get close to them, just look them in the eye, act as if they don't have a badge. Once you greet them, you can go to the badge, say, oh, you're from so-and-so, or from this part of the country, and try to find some areas of commonality to start the conversation with.
So great advice there is let's go back and talk about body language. Too often in booths, you say the people staffing the booth are, if there's no one right there at the time, they're congregated together, forming a little tight circle, and when somebody comes by, they see that, they feel like they're excluded. And you want to make sure that your people are facing outward.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to them talking to each other, and I don't like them lining up right along the edge of the carpeting because they become part of that invisible wall between the booth's carpeting and the carpeting in the aisle. But just inside the booth, they can be chatting, they can be playing with their own products, or they can be doing something on a computer screen, but their attention needs to be on the booth itself. And if people even stop in the aisle and look inside the booth, it's perfectly fine to take a step outside and ask them if they'd like to enter the booth. But yeah, body language is key. If you don't want to be there, you're going to show that with your body. And I'm not opposed to just crossing your arms if you have a smile on your face. But if you don't want to be there, you've seen people in the booth who don't want to be there. They have a scowl on their face. It's like they think it's wasting their time. But in high technology, or I do a lot of business there and in healthcare and things. In high technology, it's about $700 to $800 an hour per person to have someone in the booth. These are expensive. So you need to be on your toes the whole time. You need to greet people quickly and act like you want to be there. I mean, there are great customers found at trade shows. And it might be the only time during the year where even an existing customer gets some FaceTime with one of your people. So much business is done via email and over the phone now that this is a great opportunity and a responsibility to have some FaceTime with these people. You need to take that seriously and take advantage of it.
Well, and also it's really could be the first time that you, as a representative of your company, or the first time the potential customer, has devoided of an impression of your company, right? And so
totally
first impressions created, if it's negative, that's going to carry over into the sales process. In general, you may have lost the opportunity to even engage with that customer just by virtue of how your people are acting or not reacting to the prospect as they enter your booth.
I couldn't say it better, Andy. And in fact, if you take a lead, the tacit agreement there, the unspoken agreement is someone's going to get back to you. So again, the first impression for follow-up oftentimes fails because leads aren't even followed up on. So the visitor is expecting someone to call them and nobody does, or calls them, a month later. Gee, is that the kind of service we're going to get from this company if we do business with them? So the whole thing is an opportunity to show how much you care about that person and their business, and how quick your service is to differentiate yourself from the other competitors.
Great. So everybody, stay with us after the break. We're going to take a short one here as Matt Hill shares more of his tips about how to turn trade shows into an effective and productive sales tool. Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today. Welcome back. My guest today is Matt Hill, founder of the Hill Group. You can check him out at hillgroup.com. And let's talk about I want to pose a scenario for you. It's unrelated to trade shows, and then we'll get back into trade shows for a second.
Okay.
Question I ask all my guests. So you're a new sales manager. You've been hired into a company whose sales have stalled, stagnated, and upper management's really, really anxious to get things turned around in a hurry. So what are the two things you could do in the first week that would have the biggest impact?
So this is not related to trade shows, as you said.
Not related to trade shows, just tapping your sales knowledge in general.
Tapping my sales knowledge in general. I'm not sure if I had the opportunity to look and see why sales are not happening. I truly believe for any salesperson, the fundamental difference between someone who's knocking it down and someone who isn't is activity. And whether you're on the phone, you're at a trade show, you're knocking on doors, you're emailing, activity counts. So I would look at activity first and ramp up the activity. I also think attitude counts hugely. If people are disgruntled, if their confidence is low, that will greatly affect how they come across and actually how much work they do. So raising attitude is not as easy as just upping activity. So I think the opportunity for the company, for the products, for the customer base needs to be spelled out, and you could even have a team meeting and ask for ideas on how to do this. In other words, so with those two things, the manager can ask for help and tap into the resources and the experience of the salespeople that work for them. So collaboratively, they come up with a plan of action that everybody owns and expects to implement with milestones. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, well, there's no right answer. That's why I asked the question.
Okay. I didn't fail that one. That's good.
No, you didn't fail that one.
Okay.
So let's get back to what we were talking about right before the break, which is really most essential thing in trade show selling that gets overlooked. Is, it's great. We can have the great messaging. We can have a beautiful booth, and we can actually have good traffic through the booth in terms of leads generated. But the ROI for the trade show comes from taking orders off of those leads that are generated, and you're never going to get orders off those leads if you don't follow them up. And you've used a statistic in the past about the percentage of sales leads from a trade show that get followed up or don't get followed up. And why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, when I see this number, and I see it just about every year, it still is astounding to me. And it's that sort of that overused percentage of 80%, but it's somewhere between 75 and 90% of leads aren't even followed up, which is astounding to me. The old joke, they pull the booth out of storage and the drawer falls open and there's the leads from the previous year,
Which I'm laughing at. If it weren't so painfully true, it'd be even more funny.
The average cost for a lead is about $275 to generate a qualified lead in an average booth. And it's just astounding to me. I mean, here's someone who wants information. And, trade show leads are like the third best or second best in Marcom, as opposed to people, making a direct inquiry into the company or sending a card back. Those are the top two. And then there's trade show leads. And, to get the respect they deserve, and even if that, visitor is not your client because it's from a different part of the country or different part of the business, it doesn't matter. It's still your company's lead. And it's getting better. I'd like to think the companies I work with are pretty good, but I see that statistic every year. It just blows me away that here's, someone who wants contact and it's not happening. It's just amazing to me. That's falls into that activity thing I brought up earlier. That activity, go follow these up. Make sure every single lead is followed up thoroughly. Complete information on the lead so the conversation doesn't have to start over. It's followed up within a week with something. That all needs to happen. I know people that get a ton of business out of trade shows. A lot of companies are missing that opportunity.
So what are some good standard processes that companies should implement in terms of capturing the lead as it comes into the booth and then getting it assigned and measuring and monitoring the follow-up that should take place after that?
Well, first thing is to work with people who do business with you in the booth. So make sure the qualifying questions are there as far as, their role in decision making, need for your product, time frame, budget, all that stuff. Don't just grab business cards and stick them in your pocket. The show does not get credit for them if you do that. They won't hit the system, whether it's Salesforce or some other CRM. So make sure you have a lead system that'll take it electronically. You can pump it right into a lead system. The hot lead should go out that night.
Let's stop there before we go forward. So I don't know if you can give an example of a brand name, let's say, of a company that or a system that you can put in a booth that I guess you'd say you're scanning the badges, let's say, when they come in, and that information's being then captured in a file, which you can then upload to your CRM system.
Yeah, well, the easiest one is every show has a vendor for that, and you can just rent the equipment. Okay. Every show. So you can do that. There are independents like New Leads and a bunch of others, Lead Wizard and things like that. You can just go search for lead capture equipment, and you can rent from them or you can buy from them if you do a lot of shows and it makes sense to do that. But it's really key that you do that and you put your qualifiers in there. I know clients that get a great open rate, I think it's crazy number, like 30-40% open rate if they send out information during the show. So someone leaves your booth after having their badge scanned, and in 20 minutes they get an email from you. They may show it to someone else at the show. It actually might help drive traffic, but that's the capability of a good electronic system. And what I'm seeing now are more and more apps. You just rent the app, lease the app, if you will, download it to your phone or your tablet. So everybody in the booth can take a lead. Everybody's using the same software, and you can send documents from it. You can do all that. That part really has gotten automated. So don't stuff business cards in your pocket, and get back to people very quickly. Obviously, that's the message. And if you can target your follow-up, your fulfillment piece, and just don't send them every brochure you have. So that's why you ask good questions and make them, you want to give them a different experience in your booth, a targeted personal experience, not just a generic experience. So the follow-up should be the same, a personal follow-up. That's differentiate yourself and do that, and you'll come across as very different.
Yeah, and I can't stress that enough for companies and sales leaders that are listening to this, marketing people, is that, send that first follow-up immediately while they're still at the show. They may show it to colleagues that are at the show with them.
That's right.
As you talked about, they'll come back to the booth so you get a chance at a second or third engagement in person while they're still at the show.
That's right.
And you're going to find that those deals are going to close at a much higher rate than those that you just follow up with afterwards, because the sales follow-up tends to be fairly spotty. And that's a subject for a whole nother show that we've had about the sales lead follow-up. And we'll talk about that again more in the future. But really important, you get the leads into your system immediately and that they're assigned. Either there's an automated email follow-up or there's actually a personal follow-up that goes out from either their assigned rep or the rep that talked to them in the booth.
Yeah, there needs to be some accountability for that. One thing I want to bring up too, a lot of people go to the show thinking they need a new product, they want to upgrade or something, and they'll walk away from the show with like 10 vendors they want to continue to investigate. You want to be one of those 10. And a lot of people go to the show already have whittled down their list of preferred vendors to 2 or 3. And if you're on that list, you definitely want to get the business, and it could happen relatively soon. So these things are really important. It doesn't matter what people look like or anything. You got to ask those questions and nail it down, and you'll get the business. I mean, I've seen it happen over and over. I've seen deals lost because someone's rude to a visitor in the booth, or they don't care about them. They don't recognize their name and their company. And, it's just a really big mistake. This is a great opportunity. You can have, a dozen good conversations a day, probably more, 20 good conversations a day in a booth at the right show. And if you're in field sales or telemarketing, inside sales or something, you may not have those kind of conversations in one day, especially in the field. You're going to make 2 or 3 sales calls. So it's really, it's a great
the typical inside sales rep maybe has 2 or 3
Yeah.
substantive sales conversations a day. So, yeah, it's a huge multiplier. And,
It totally is. Yeah, it totally is.
well, and it speaks to an issue. It's well worth having, I think, it's well worth having good people in the booth. It's not a penalty box to send people to that, the lowest level people in the company, people that say they're, don't have anything else to do, so let's send them to a trade show. These are selling environments. Have good people staffing your booth.
Well, it's a good friend of mine, Andy Paul. He wrote this book, Zero Time Selling and Amp Up Your Sales. Maybe you know him, Andy. I think it's
I've heard
you.
of him, yes.
And, yeah. And I tell you what, your book fits beautifully into the trade show environment with putting that person in the booth who has great product knowledge, because you don't want them to say, I'll get back to you, or we'll get back to you. Look at the experience the visitor's going to get. They're greeted quickly. They feel like they're welcomed. The conversation or the presentation, demo, whatever, is targeted to exactly what they care about. The person knows enough to go enough through the sales cycle to have them want some follow-up, because really that's the objective. A lot of times you're not going to write an order, but you want them to be interested enough to agree to some follow-up. And that's what the stuff in your book says, and I totally agree with that. And I've changed my opinion on that. I would say you can send a variety of people. Yeah, you can, but you really want product knowledgeable people in the booth. You really do.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to jump into the last part of the show here today. A little bit away from trade show. I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions. You can give me single word responses, or you can elaborate a little bit.
All right.
You ready?
Oh, sure. Why not?
Sure. So, what's the most powerful sales tool in your arsenal?
Me. I am.
Who's your sales role model?
Lately, frankly, I know it's embarrassing. It's been you. That's the best sales book I've read in 20 years. Seriously, you're just cutting. I'm not making this up. I'm not. I
thank
talk
you.
about your stuff all the time. I do.
We'll have you back on the show.
I'll get the same fee, I hope.
Yeah, the same fee, right? The exact same fee, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So, your favorite music to listen to psych yourself up for a sales call?
Oh. Interesting. I'm not sure I use music to psych myself up for a sales call, but if I were to, I would put on some. I'm a little bit older, so I'd put on some really fast rock and roll, some Boston or REO Speedwagon or even the Allman Brothers. I like that. So
sounds great.
Yeah.
What's the first sales activity you do every day?
First sales activity I do every day is look at my calendar. Yeah. What's my to-do list? That kind of thing.
What do you do to keep fit and healthy?
Oh, well, I ride a mountain bike a bunch of times a week, and I play tennis. I stretch out every morning. I definitely keep that part of my life balanced, so I feel good and have a lot of energy.
And the one question you get asked most frequently by salespeople?
Did I get asked most frequently?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Because depending on what they're selling, the question could be different. The one question I get asked most frequently by salespeople is maybe, what do I do? Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good one. So, all right. Well, that's good. Well, we've had a great show talking about trade show selling with my guest, Matt Hill, founder and CEO of the Hill Group. Matt, how can people get hold of you?
Oh, well, hillgroup.com, and then it's mhill@hillgroup.com. Is that what they need?
Sounds great. Hopefully they can get hold of you.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I want to thank you so much for being part of the show. And remember, everybody who's listening, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new, like Matt talked about today. Learn something new to help you accelerate your sales. And if you listen to the show today, I believe we helped you with that. So until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.